Kardashev Street.
How to get to
Kardashev Street.
No expense spared. Hi. In 1964, a physicist called Nikolai Kardashev proposed a speculative scale, or a typology of civilizations, based on their ability to harness energy. It's often used in science fiction to explore the far future or alien civilizations that are doing a better job than us. Type 1 is a civilization that is usually defined as being able to harness all of the energy that reaches its home planet, that is on its home planet, from its parent star. Oops, sorry. A type 2 civilization can capture all of the energy of its parent star by building a massive cage around it, often called a Dyson sphere. And a type 3 civilization, it can harness all the energy of its home galaxy. We're a little bit far away from that. We are reckoned to be about 0.7 on the Kardashev scale, which sounds quite good, but it's based on our consumption. So it's based on all of the, real dinosaurs that we dig up and burn. Our current solar production is 1% of that, more or less. And you might already know this, but for us to have a shot at a livable future, and this is the do-do day, we know we need to make changes. We need to basically move all of that consumption to electricity, and then we need to move all of that production of electricity to getting it from sources which are more directly from our parent star, solar, wind, and water. And I'm very biased, but I kind of subscribe to that sort of that outlook that we have everything that we need. This is a book by Mark Jacobson from Stanford about how no miracle technologies are needed. I'd really love us to have nuclear fusion, but we don't need it. We already have all the technology we need. We just need to build it. Wind, water, solar, plus storage and software can take us to type 1 living. But more on that later. So we don't need to complicate things, is what I'm saying. Oh, sorry, you were taking a picture of that. There you go. You can find that on the internet, but yeah, there you go. Sorry. So when I arrived on Friday, Malmo, I saw this on one of their posted up. Did anybody go to this? No? Okay. You're all bad people. No, I didn't go either. But so there was a thing called the Overshoot Festival, and you might know this concept of Earth Overshoot Day, which is a way of visualizing how we use resources on Earth right now, and sort of at what point during the calendar year we kind of pass the boundary of having used up the sort of resources that we're sort of entitled to, if you like, during that year. And this year it was at the beginning of the month. But one thing that when I looked at this was kind of interesting is, I was born in as was pointed out, I am old in the introduction. I was born in 1972. Earth population was about 3.8 billion. It's right now about twice. And there's an interesting kind of flattening out that is happening. So while this is a visualization which is also meant to scare the hell out of us, there's also something interesting happening there. Is that a cause for optimism? Is how do we move that blue line back up? How do we sort of do this while allowing perhaps 10 billion people to flourish? And another thing I'm sure people in this room are aware of is the work of Kate Raworth and donut economics, where you have, and it was mentioned earlier today, where you have this idea of a donut, where the ecological ceiling is the outer skin of the donut, and the inner sort of floor, if you like, is a sort of equitable social foundation for all. But one of the things on the donut is not like the others, and that sort of interests me. I guess one of the things that kind of I keep thinking is like, well, what if we could make one aspect of a donut really, 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 really big? And hopefully this video will work, which I stole from the
There's so much energy coming in that if everybody on the
conference
planet
last year.
used energy at the rate of energy consuming Canadians, right, at their per capita energy usage, that would still only be a fraction of a percent. So again, this is the thing that probably many of you in this room are aware of, right? That renewable energy is not just like, oh, it's kind of enough for us. It's like it is genuinely, abundantly more than enough for every human on Earth to have access to that energy. And as we just saw, energy is the main way in which we get agency in the world at large, right?
So, rough calculation, there's 10 to the 4 orders of magnitude more energy possible from what we could harness from our parent star. That's not 4 times, that's 4 orders of magnitude. And I just can't, I've tried to get my head around that and sort of see what that might mean to where we might be able to head in the future. And a little donut experiment, a little visualization. 10 to the 1 is where we are right now. 10 to the 4, a 10 to the 4 donut, you can't even see the curvature of it. It's a sort of a black line at the end there. So if we zoom out, that's the 10 to the 4 donut. We can't even see the 10 to the 1 donut anymore. That's 10 to the 2. Like, this is very, very, very different as a number. That's what you take away from these very silly diagrams of donuts. 10 to the 4. 10 to the 4 more energy, if we can capture it, if we can harness it, is possible just from the solar potential of the Earth. And that just keeps going around in my head. Like, what if we could do that? And that's not to discount all of the other challenges on the donut, all of the other sort of planetary boundaries that we're exceeding, all of the constraints and challenges that we see around the world, all of the injustices. And it's certainly not to discount also the extractive impacts of building these sorts of technologies. However, 15 billion tons of stuff gets extracted every year and gets set fire to, compared to 7 million tons of stuff that we turn into batteries and solar panels and those sorts of things. So, so again, this is sort of sitting with me. What could we do with this much energy? And how might we use it to work on all of our other challenges? Because it occurs to me that we don't really have, perhaps, looking at this, an energy problem. We have a matter problem. We have an entropy problem. We might not have an energy problem. And if we flip the world around to look at it that way, what does that let us think? What does that let us do about all of the other things that we need to fix? So with that in mind, I want to go back to where we are right now on our journey to being a Kardashev Type 1 civilization. Specifically, the work I've been doing for the last 2.5 years or so since I left Google in late 2021. I've been working for a company called Lunar Energy. It's founded on a belief in what is often called in the sort of energy transition industry, the 3Ds of the future of energy: digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization. And this graphic from The Economist illustrates it very succinctly, as you expect from the economist. Maybe the same. Not really. So at the top, in purple, what we've had for the last 150 years or so, a sort of topology of very large generational plants, usually burning dinosaurs. On the right, where we're heading, many small power production units, often embedded in neighborhoods, a grid which is centralized, top-down, mostly national, moving to a grid which is decentralized, much more of a mesh, something which is going from sort of very heavyweight technologies, high voltages, to something which is far smaller scale, local and lighter in nature. Something, as I said, going from top to bottom to something which is bidirectional. And then finally, going from us being sort of passive consumers, paying for the energy, to being active participants in this new architecture. And this is incredibly appealing to me, obviously, not only as somebody who sort of felt the same way, what was it, 30 years ago, when I first encountered the web, And that's sort of topology based on those sorts of architectural principles, but also somebody who trained as an architect. And this quote from Saarinen sort of springs to mind when I sort of see this: always design a thing by considering it in its next larger context. A chair in a room, a house an environment, and an environment in a city plan. And as I say, I've been working for this company. I left at end of July, Lunar Energy, and we had two main products. One is a sort of solar battery that's for residential use, which stores energy from the sun in a big, beautiful battery we put on the side of your house. And the other product I'm going to talk about a bit later. But this comes back to this idea of solar and storage and software, being the other sort of missing part that we need, the missing key to unlocking that sort of solar endowment that we've been talking about. And this diagram is called the duck curve. And I guess it kind of looks like a duck, I suppose. If you go bird watching tomorrow, don't use this to identify anything. But as you can see, it's a sort of 24-hour plot here. And what you're seeing is kind of basically the massive peak in solar production that happens in the middle of the day versus the sort of neck and the head and the beak of the duck, which is when we all come home and want to use that energy. And this is a plot for California. Here's 2015, here's 2023. And you can see how much solar production has been added to that state's infrastructure. But we need to sort of shift all of that to this evening peak using storage and software. And I got this email last week from my energy provider in the UK, Octopus, where they told me I could get free electricity for an hour on the Thursday, and I could start doing anything I wanted. It just said, fill your boots at 1 p.m. And this is this sort of like weird idea of what they call negative pricing, because this abundance is a huge issue for the incumbent architectures. And so they have to sort of find ways to kind of shed this energy during the day, 1 to 2 p.m. Please use all of this because we can't store it. We'll have to sort of throw it away. Just this weekend, it was very, very windy and sunny. And this is from, I think, Sunday. And you can see that here you have megawatts being sort of sold, if you like, in negative prices of minus 20 euros around the sort of Nordic area, which is kind of remarkable. And this is the sort of the logic of the market applied to this abundance, if you like. And so how do we sort of turn this on its head? The other thing I mentioned about software in the company I was working at, Lunar Energy, is being able to tie together those batteries with software to turn them into a network that shows up when you need it. So time shifting the energy to later in the day, but also having it show up all at once. So you're kind of putting all of these batteries together in a sort of like big coat, and kind of like they're knocking on the door of the grid and showing up all at once in a way that can then replace fossil fuel power. So this is about 5, 6 o'clock, and you can see all of those batteries starting to discharge the grid. And this work is sonification of the energy data from the batteries done by an old bird colleague of mine, Tom Armitage, with me back at Lunar. Also, smart batteries can read the weather report. So this is a really interesting example, I think, from 2022, from where we have a fleet in Japan, which was encountering a typhoon, which was sort of forming. This was being tracked by the weather authorities. And so in this time series plot, you could start to see that the batteries are starting to, having read the weather report, start to kind of like back up. We just missed that in the GIF, but they back up ready to make the grid more resilient. There we go. In knowledge of what is coming their way. And so what's kind of interesting for me is this kind of resemblance to other sort of very resilient grids, as I said, that we've built in the past, and kind of then how we can then increase that legibility of it. This is a book called Downtime on Microgrid by Malcolm McCullough, which is wonderful. I commend it to you to read. But it also talks about the feeling of ownership and legibility that you get from studying these sorts of things. There's a great passage in here. Personally, I find this new grid awareness downright delightful. I feel better about powering things up every day. I see the city differently. I happily notice electric substations. I can make a bit more sense of the clean technology news. I see past the utopians and the doomers. I unplug more often and worry less about technological dependency the rest of the time. And that's this sort of electro-regionalism, if you like, that I'm really interested in. So like zooming in from like planetary civilization to kind of where we live, and going from Kardashev type 1 planets to what might be Kardashev type 1 streets. Because the other thing that is interesting about this stuff is that it isn't far away. It's not happening in remote locations. It's where we live. It's on our roofs. And this is our rooftops are an astonishing resource pointing at our parent star. This is from Nature at the end of late last year, looking at the kind of incredible performance of rural residential solar in China. It's at 50%. It's double the capacity of what's installed in the continental United States right now. And those are impressive numbers. Probably a very sort of top-down initiative. I'm more interested in sort of enabling bottom-up architectures of doing this kind of thing. Sort of resembling a sort of internet of energy. And something that is more like the world of ends described by David Weinberger and Doc Searls, where no one owns it, everyone can use it, and anyone can improve it. And not off-grid isolation or rugged individualism as solar batteries often marketed in the United States, but something where people can actively make their own grids. To make a Kardashev type 1 world, I think we need to make Kardashev streets. This is Lynmouth Road in northeast London, Walthamstow, where the street has got together to try and get permission to turn their street into a solar power station. And you might have heard of, in Germany, this wonderful thing called balcony solar. It's, of course, elsewhere in the world. But this is where, and they have a great word, Balkonkraftwerk. So this is where the technology is going from the direction of sort of camping and hiking to the home, rather than sort of from kind of big solar power station installations, those kinds of things. And the German legislation just recently changed so that this balcony solar can actually contribute to the grid through the simplicity of plugging this kit, which costs maybe a couple of €1,000, into the outlet in their own home. And so that kind of legislation is also kind of like the subject for design, right? It's the sort of strategic design work that Dan Hill has pointed out in the past and others have pointed out as the kind of dark matter that we need to work with to kind of change these sorts of conditions. And I think the other things that are kind of interesting is like how you then tie those to the sort of communities that were talked about this morning as well, and community making, and how do you sort of create rituals or kind of institutions at a municipal level that people might be able to join into and maintain Kardashev streets. Dugnad in I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing these all wrong. Dugnad in Norway, Talkut in Finland, Harambee in Kenya. There could be extensions of existing sort of traditions to kind of maintain these. This is a wonderful illustration from a book by Clifford Harper called Radical Technologies in 1974. This is a sort of a utopian terrace somewhere in the UK where there's solar energy in abundance, there are shared workshops, everybody's living happily together. Here's the floating university in Berlin, another sort of aesthetic, which is perhaps more up-to-date version of that. And I think that's also something that's missing that designers and product folks can contribute, is envisioning just how much better this could be at street level in the everyday. And so far, for me, this has been done not by Hollywood, not by big tech, but by a yogurt company.
Dear Alice, this place is yours now. It's a handful, but nothing worth doing is easy. The land is more than just dirt. If you look after it, it will feed you forever. You're a smart one. I know you'll be okay come rain or shine. And remember, a business is only as good as its people, so treat them well. Our job is to plant seeds so our grandkids get to enjoy the fruit. So, Eat well, Alice. And keep planting those seeds. Because how we eat today feeds tomorrow.
So there's an election in the United States in November. I'm sure after that, it'll all just resemble that, of course. And we should all be so lucky to get Joe Hishashi to do our soundtracks for our advertisements. But I think being able to kind of like show that positive future, which is based on the physics, based on the numbers, and based on the technology we have right now, but showing the challenges that we need to do in the regulation, in the service design, in the access to these things, and the architectures of participation in them is the work that we have to do. I'm going to start trying to do that at kardashevstreet.com. You're very welcome to follow along. Thank you very much.